The Project Gutenberg ebook of Harwood's Vortex. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. Title: Harwood's Vortex. Author: Robert Silverberg. Release date: June 6, 2021. Ebook number 65537. Language: English. Credits: Greg Weeks, Mary Meehan, and the online distributed proofreading team at http://www.pgdp.net. Start of the Project Gutenberg ebook. Harwood's Vortex. Imagine walking up a street and having the sky literally burst open over your head. Imagine invaders pouring down and you have Harwood's Vortex by Robert Silverberg. Transcriber's note: this text was produced from Imagination Stories of Science and Fantasy. April 1957. Extensive research did not uncover any evidence that the U.S. copyright on this publication was renewed. The vortex bubbled up out of nowhere, hung shimmering in the air in front of me, glistened and gleamed brightly. There was a whirlpool of twisting currents in the air, and I wavered dizzily for a second or two while the invaders poured through the newly created gulf. Then someone had me by the hand, someone was pulling me away, leading me inside the house, behind a screen, safe from danger. I didn't understand what had happened. I was numb with shock, half blinded by the brightness. I felt Laura near me, and that was all I cared to think about. After a couple of minutes, I opened my eyes. What was that? I asked weakly. What happened? 2 minutes before, I had been approaching the Harwood house, impatient to see Laura, untroubled by the world around me. And suddenly it was Daddy's experiment, Laura half sobbed. It had worked. The old crackpot, I said. The dimensional gulf at last. I wouldn't believe it, if I hadn't nearly fallen into it. She nodded. I saw you staggering around out there. I got out front just in time to I held her tight against me, while she unloaded some of her anxiety. She sobbed for a minute or two, not trying to say anything. I looked uneasily out the window. Yes, it was still going on. Right in front of Abel Harwood's house, the vortex was open and coming up through it were what we later knew as the invaders. Globes of light, radiant and intangible, floating up out of nowhere and wringing themselves in the air like so many loathsome jellyfish. Why doesn't he close it? I asked. Those things are still coming through. Laura, where's your father? I'm right here, said a cold, businesslike voice from behind me. I turned and saw Abel Harwood's husky frame in the door. What do you want of me? Harwood asked. Do you see what's going on out there? He nodded. So. Those things out there, what are they? What are you letting into the world, Harwood? It's an experiment, young man. He crossed his arms over his dressing gown. Would you mind leaving my house, now? Daddy. You keep out of this, Laura. He turned to me. I've asked you to leave my house. I don't want you meddling in my experiments anymore. I repressed an urge to aim a kick at his well-stuffed belly. Abel Harwood was a crackpot, a crazy amateur scientist who had been riding this other dimension kick for years. Now, he'd let loose. Lord knew what upon the world the things were still funneling through the gateway, and he was determined to see it continue. Harwood, you're playing with something too big for you. You're foolish and blind, and you're a trespasser, he interrupted. I've ordered you out of my home twice, already. Will you go now, or do I have to get my gun? I'll go, I said. I broke loose from Laura and, with an uneasy look at the gateway outside, headed for the door. Wait, Dad, you can't make him go outside in that. Quiet, Laura. She started to say something else, but I put my hand on her arm. Never mind, Laura. I opened the front door and stepped outside. It was hellish out there. The things had formed a circle around the vortex in the air and hung there, humming and crackling. The air was dry and strange smelling. I paused on the porch of the Harwood house for just a moment, tucked my head under my arm and ran as fast as my legs would go. I charged through the garden, carefully averting the vortex that had opened right in front of me, circled the nest of things buzzing in the air, and dashed down the street. One of the creatures followed me a short distance, hovering a foot or two above my head. I watched it uneasily, dodged and ducked as it took swipes at me. It caught me once, a grazing blow on the side of my scalp. I smelled burned hair, and felt as if I'd stuck my head up an electric socket. It drove low for another swipe. And just then it began to rain. The heavens opened and the water came pouring down and the sky was bright with lightning. And the globes went up to meet it. The one that had been tormenting me forgot me in an instant and went to join its fellows. I stood there and watched them. They rose in a straight line. There must have been 100 of them by now, climbing upwards, toward the black clouds overhead. The sky was split by a giant bolt of lightning, and I saw all 100 of them limned grotesquely against it, enlarged and given color by the lightning, drinking it. Then I started running again. I kept on running until I was home, in my 2-room flat near the university. I dove in, locked and bolted the door, threw off my soaking clothing. I grabbed for the phone and dialed the Harwood number. Hello. It was Laura's voice. I sighed in relief. It could have been old Abel, after all. Laura? This is Chuck. Her voice dropped. Daddy's right here. I can't talk very much. Tell me, what the devil has he done? You should have seen those things drinking up the lightning. I did, she said. I know what you mean. Is the gateway still open? Yes. They're still coming through. Chuck, I don't know what's going to happen. I know, Daddy. There was a sound of a little scuffle, and then the phone went dead. I stared at the silent receiver for a second, then let it thunk back on the cradle. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at my soggy socks for a long while. Abel Harwood fit the classic description of a crackpot perfectly. My status as an authentic scientist, if only an underpaid engineer, gave me every right to make that statement. I had been doing some experimental force field work, and when I met Laura she told me her father would be interested in talking to me about my work. So I had dinner at their home one night, and started talking about my project, and then old Harwood started talking about his. It was some hodgepodge. Dimensional tubes, and force vortices, and subspace converters. A network of gadgetry in the basement that had taken 20 years and as many $1,000s to build. A fantastic theory of bordering dimensions and alien races. I listened as long as I could, then made the mistake of expressing my honest opinion. Harwood looked at me a long time after I finished. Then he said, just like all the others. Very well, Mr. Matthews. Kindly don't pay us a second visit. If that's the way you want it, I told him. But I still think it's cockeyed. And a month later, I still did. Only now there was this vortex in the street, spewing forth alien entities that drank radiation. Crackpot or not, Harwood had turned something on that might take some doing to turn off. Outside, the storm was continuing. I snapped on my radio, listened to the crackling of static that was the only sound it produced. Were Harwood's pets blanketing the radio frequencies, I wondered, as I twiddled the dials? Were they drinking them too? I'd know soon enough, I thought. That was just the beginning, that night when the invaders came storming out of Harwood's vortex. The next few days told of terror and panic, of retreat, and the swift crumbling of civilization. The invaders, they were called. Thousands of them, wandering around New York and the metropolitan area, devouring electricity, attacking people, bringing a reign of terror to the city. The newspapers the second day said, in screaming 2-inch headlines, "Alien beings loose here." The third day, there were no more newspapers. No one dared leave his home, not with the invaders at large. No newspapers, no radio, no television. The channels of communication began to break down. On the fourth day, armed forces from the rest of the country began to arrive. They combed the city, searching for the creatures. Bullets had no effect, though. They passed right through the bodies of the invaders, splattered off buildings and lampposts as though there had been nothing in the way. Damn Harwood, I thought, as I stood at my window and watched the fruitless attempts to drive away the invaders. All the time, I knew, that damnable vortex was still open, and more of them were pouring through every second. It was funny, in a way, that the world should end this way. It was the end of the world, of course. We had no defense against them, and they burned and killed unstoppably. The streets were blockaded, we could go nowhere, see no one. Communication was impossible, telephones were no longer working, ever since the invaders had discovered what a juicy supply of radiation the coaxial cables provided. We were walled up with ourselves, waiting for the end. As I paced my room impatiently, I thought of Laura, there with her father who had, unwittingly or otherwise, brought this destruction into the world. Then I looked around at my equipment, my partially designed force field generators. An idea struck me. We were completely defenseless against the invaders now. But maybe, if I worked through the night and on into the morning, soldering and reconnecting. I had only the barest shred of a plan, and that a mostly wishful one, but I had nothing else at all to do but work. Finally morning came. Again there was the booming of guns from outside, as the army continued its attempts to drive out the invaders. I glanced out the window and saw 3 of the translucent globes hovering over the charred body of a man in military uniform, and shuddered. I went back to my generator, and worked until hunger reminded me that there was no food left in the house. This was the end, then. I was nowhere near the solution of my problem, and I knew I wouldn't be able to work for long without food. I glanced outside again. The air was thick with the things, I didn't dare risk a break. So I turned back to my generator and forced myself to keep working. I did. I worked far on into the afternoon, getting more and more tired until, sometime near nightfall, I fell asleep. I slept. Suddenly, I was awakened by the simultaneous touch of a hand on my shoulder and clap of thunder outside. I looked up. Laura. What are you doing here? I had to get away, she said. She was soaked to the skin, cold and shivering. She was wearing only a flimsy housecoat over some sort of pajamas. Daddy wasn't looking, and I ran out of the house. I ran all the way. But how'd you get past the invaders? She pointed outside. There's a storm going on. They're all in the sky, drinking up the lightning again. They didn't bother me at all on the way over. Much better food available, I guess. She shivered again. Look, you've got to get out of that wet stuff, I told her. I threw her a towel and my bathrobe. Here, get into this, and then we can talk. Okay. She disappeared into my other room, and returned a few minutes later, looking drier but just as pale and frightened. She peered inquisitively at the machine I had been building, then turned to me. Chuck, Dad's out of his mind. I've known that a long time, I said. No, I don't mean that way. He's really insane, Chuck. You know that he's been in contact with these invaders? That he deliberately brought them here? No. She nodded. He reached them through some shortwave transmitter of his, and made mental contact with them. They showed him how to build the gateway and he let them through. They promised to give him the world, when they get through with it. I clenched my fists and stared angrily at the cloud-swept sky. The madman. He was getting his revenge for the years people laughed at him, I guess. But what's to happen to us? I don't know. The creatures won't harm him, and they're under orders not to touch me unless I leave his protection, which I have. But as for you and the rest of the world, I don't think Daddy cares at all. Chuck, he's out of his head. We've got to stop him, I said grimly. We've got to close that gateway and drive off the things he's let through. But how? The generator's in his basement, Laura said. If we could get in there and smash it, somehow, and how would we kill the invaders that have already come through? There must be thousands of them. We'll find some way, Chuck. There must be a way. I looked out the window. The rain was letting up, and there were only occasional flashes of lightning in the dark, tormented-looking sky. The invaders will be coming back soon, I said. Do you want to risk a dash over to your place to try to get at the generator? She nodded. If we wait any longer, we won't be able to make it. But she gasped and pointed to the rear window. I turned, saw what she was trying to show me. Abel Harwood, hovering 20 feet off the ground, riding on a cloud of invaders. Come out of there, Laura. His voice was somehow amplified and it seemed to shake my little room. Horror-stricken, we watched as the buzzing horrors bore Harwood closer and closer to my window. Laura shrank back against the wall and tried to flatten herself into invisibility. With a sudden nervous gesture I pushed the table containing my unfinished generator into the closet, and turned to face Harwood. He was right outside the window now. I saw the old man's staring eyes blazing at me, as he stood there astride two of the invaders. They droned like defective neon signs, a horrifying slow buzz. I picked up a heavy soldering iron and waited as they reached the window. Then Harwood reached out and contemptuously smashed the glass and stepped right off the backs of his hideous mounts and into my room. One of the invaders entered also, squeezing its bulk through the window. There was a pungent odor of ozone in the air. Get back, Harwood. You can't have her, I said. He laughed. Who are you to give me orders? Come here, Laura. Laura shrank back even further. I gripped the hot soldering iron tightly and sprang forward, plunging it into the invader that hovered between me and Harwood. I stabbed again and it was like stabbing air. Finally Harwood made an impatient gesture, and the invader glowed a brilliant red for an instant. I dropped the soldering iron and clutched at my burned hand. For the last time, Laura, will you come with me? No. I hate you, she shrieked. Harwood frowned and started toward her. As he came past me, I grabbed him with my one good hand and tried to pull him back. I had 30 years on him, but my right hand was badly seared and he was no weakling even at his age. He shoved me away and sent me sprawling against the wall. I saw him grab Laura roughly. The alien hummed ominously above my head. I made a mad dash for Harwood, caught him by the throat, started to squeeze. The humming sound grew louder, and then suddenly there was a blinding wave of heat sweeping through the apartment, and I fell back, clawing at the floor. When I was able to open my eyes, a few minutes later, I dashed to the window just in time to see Harwood holding the struggling form of Laura and riding off into the night on the backs of his extra-dimensional invaders. I sat down heavily on the bed and stayed there for what might have been hours, recovering my strength. The invader had given me just a glancing shock, just enough to stun me and singe my eyebrows, and Harwood had grabbed Laura. Now I had to find the answer. I had to close the gateway and find some way of killing the invaders and get Laura out of her father's clutches. It was nearly morning by the time I shook off the last effects of my stunning and was able to think clearly again. I pulled my generator out of the closet and looked at it, wondering what needed to be done. The gateway, first of all. It was a doorway to some alien dimension, Harwood had said. All right. I'd accept that at face value. The invaders, what were they? Pure radiation? Energy eaters. They were intangible, immaterial, but yet very much present. Perhaps, I thought wildly, their corporeal bodies were still in whatever dimension of infraspace they came from, and merely their essences, their elas, had come through. Could be, I thought. And if it were true, I might have the answer. Ignoring the fierce pangs of hunger shooting through me, I got back to work and concentrated steadily. The thought of Laura was with me always, the image of her riding off in the sky with her father's arms locked tightly around her. Riding off as if kidnapped by a witch on a broomstick. I don't know how long it took, but finally my generator was finished. Finished, and portable. I strapped it to my back and picked up my longest and sharpest kitchen knife. I didn't have a gun, but it didn't matter. If my theory was correct, a knife would be just as good, and if I were wrong, a gun wouldn't help anyway. Then, without stopping to ponder, I ran downstairs and out into the street for the test. Fresh air smelled good after days of being cooped up in my little apartment. I stood in the middle of the street and surveyed the wreckage. Bodies lay everywhere, charred and lifeless. Overturned automobiles lay piled here and there, stalled trucks, artillery batteries and tanks. The defensive maneuver had failed, and what few people remained were in hiding. I stood alone in the middle of the street, the heavy generator on my back, and waved my kitchen knife as triumphantly as if it were Excalibur. "Come and get me," I yelled. "Come on, invaders. Let's see what you can do." I looked up. There were a few clusters of them, browsing idly around some television antennas atop a neighboring building. They ignored me for a few minutes. Maybe they were so surprised to see a living human in the streets that they were unable to move. I shook my fists at them. "Come down here where I can get at you," I shouted. They hovered uncertainly and then they came. 6 of them swooped down, humming and buzzing, glowing faintly and billowing in and out as they dropped toward me. I waited until they were no more than 3 or 4 feet above my head, waited until I was dizzy with the strain and suspense and could wait no more. Then I snapped on the generator. It was like catching flies in molasses. The 6 aliens stopped dead in their tracks as my force field spread out around them, engulfed them, imprisoned them. Suddenly they were forced to contend with more radiation than they could possibly swallow. It pinned them there, 9 feet above the ground. I listened to their frenzied buzzing as they stretched themselves, elongated fantastically in an attempt to free themselves from the unexpected thing that had grabbed them. And then I stretched up on tiptoes and began to stab. My knife flashed once, twice, and the buzzing became an unbearable shriek. My heart surged as I struck home again and again. Now we had them. Now they were vulnerable. Snared in the force field, they no longer were able to flicker out of phase with our dimension every time a weapon approached. They were anchored now, mired in our continuum, helpless before my savage attack. I kept stabbing until all 6 of them were torn and wounded, and then I snapped off the force field. And they were gone. Instantly, without lapse, they popped out of existence like so many snuffed flames. 6 down, I thought grimly. 6 down, and untold thousands to go. But now we have a weapon. I thumbed my power pack and the field spread out around me. I began to cut my way through the streets to the Harwood house. The aliens took notice of me, now. No more hovering around TV antennae, they clustered in the air, just outside range of my force field, and chattered and buzzed for all they were worth. Every once in a while, one would blunder into my field, and a swift upward cut with the knife would take care of him. One cut. They were like balloons, and the first puncture did it. I didn't dare shut off the force field to see if they'd pop out of existence, for fear the clouds of them in the air would swoop in on me before I could turn it on again. But as I moved on, through the dead and deserted streets, I could see the string of dead invaders hanging in the air vanishing one by one as I moved out of range. And then I was standing in front of Laura's home, right in front of the vortex itself. It was still there, and the aliens came thundering through at a rate of 10 or 20 a minute. I stepped past the vortex, ignoring the aliens that clustered around me, as helpless against me as humanity had been against them only a few hours before. There was no point in dealing with the invaders yet, not until the source was cut off. I strode up to the porch and peered in the window. I saw Laura huddled in a far corner of the sitting room, and behind her Abel Harwood marching up and down, probably delivering a fiery parental harangue. It was a nightmare scene, with a dead city outside, hordes of alien invaders swarming in the air, and the man responsible for it busy delivering a lecture to his unruly daughter. I banged on the door. "Come on out of there, Harwood." He looked up, astonished. I saw Laura's pale face brighten as she recognized me, then grow downcast as Harwood started to come toward me. I walked off the porch into the garden and waited there for him. He emerged, eyes blazing, and said, "How did you get here? How did you get past my guards?" "Your guards don't worry me anymore, Harwood. I'm going to put a stop to all this now." He chuckled. "You're a very troublesome young man, Mr. Matthews. I spared you once, for my daughter's sake, but I'll have no such scruples this time." He gestured imperiously to the thick swarm of invaders billowing out of the vortex. "You don't scare me, Harwood." I drew a deep breath, reached around back, and cut off the force field for the barest fraction of a second, then restored it. It was just enough time to trap 20 or so aliens in a glowing ring right above my head. Smiling, I drew my trusty kitchen knife and began to lay about. I heard Harwood's flustered exclamations as, one by one, the imprisoned invaders winked out, darkened, and died. I finished off the 20 and folded my arms. "Care to send some more, Harwood? It's easier than swatting gnats." He sputtered a few unintelligible words, then rushed from the porch toward me. He was a big man, big and heavy. I was under the handicap of the heavy force field generator, which I knew I had to keep from his grasp or else I was finished. All he had to do was to smash the generator, and I'd be roasted the next second. Harwood barreled into me, sweeping away the kitchen knife while I was still debating whether or not to use it. It went clattering into a pile of rocks in one corner of the garden, and then his fists hit me. I backed away, making sure I kept the generator out of his reach, and flicked out a few defensive gestures. His face was contorted with rage. He was almost blind with fury, and I could hardly blame him. Here I stood, threatening to wreck whatever monument of villainy it was that he had been erecting for 20 years. We closed in a tight clinch, and his fists pummeled my stomach. I drove upward and felt teeth splinter as I connected. He spat out a mouthful of blood and backed off. "Why did you have to do it?" he muttered. "Why did you ruin everything?" "You pitiful madman," I said. "For the sake of silly revenge on a world that rightfully regarded you as a crackpot, you." His eyes blazed and he came driving in at me again. In the background, I heard the continuing buzzing of the invaders, who hovered out of reach of my force field, unable to help their master. And overriding the dull droning of the aliens was a steady pattern of sobbing coming from the porch. Laura. Watching her father and the man she loved fighting to the death in her front yard. Harwood grasped me in a tight bear hug, his thick fingers reaching for the power pack on my back. I danced away and landed a solid punch in the midsection, and he countered with a wild roundhouse that staggered me and knocked me within a few inches of the garden fence. He came lumbering after me, obviously determined to flatten me against the fence and crush the generator that way. I didn't have any way of escaping to the right or the left, I could only wait there and hope to withstand his assault. As he drew near, I tensed my legs and crouched. Then he hit me, and I pushed upward with all my strength. The fate of a whole world and Laura and me depended on my strength at that instant. It worked. His heavy body lifted, and he grunted in pain as I rammed upward. He went up, over the garden fence and then, to my horror, he cleared the garden fence and, with a soul-splitting cry, fell into the gaping mouth of his own vortex. I leaned against the fence, gaping, and before I could think of what to do, the vortex was gone, winked out as if it had never been. Then Laura was on the porch, white-faced, terrified. "What happened? Where's Daddy?" I ran to her side. "He's gone," I said. Tripped and fell into the vortex, and then oh. She gave a little cry and I thought she was going to faint, but she caught herself with an effort and straightened up. Speaking carefully, syllable by syllable, she said, "I just smashed Daddy's machinery." "You what?" "While you were fighting I ran down to the basement and wrecked everything." "Everything?" I shivered. No wonder the vortex had vanished. At the very instant Abel Harwood was tumbling into it, his daughter was busily destroying the generator that operated it. Her control broke. She burst into sobs and huddled in my arms. Finally she said, "I hated him. He was out of his mind." "Try not to think about it," I told her. "Try to forget him. It's all over. There's just us now." "I know," she said. I looked up at the sky, which was dark with the invaders. It was a frightening sight, but I no longer feared them. The gateway was closed, and Abel Harwood dead, so far as we were concerned. I didn't want to think of what might be happening to him in whatever universe he was in. There would be a lot of work to do. I would have to find the authorities, if any were left, and show them how to build my generator. Then would begin the long, slow war of eradication against the remaining invaders. Laura was still sobbing. "Don't worry," I said soothingly. "It's all over now. We had won." End of the Project Gutenberg ebook. Harwood's Vortex updated editions will replace the previous one. The old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, Apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances, and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start, full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Electronic Works 1.a. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLOF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying, or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee, or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works provided that, you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2. Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs, and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive, or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3. Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4. Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion, and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs, and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark. Project Gutenberg trademark is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged, and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The foundation's IN or federal tax identification number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, Utah 841-16801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact. Section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form, accessible by the widest array of equipment including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork, and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, We know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks. Harwood's Vortex, the full Project Gutenberg license.